I thought I was leaving a bedroom, not a crime scene. After 2 years of paying bills and quietly raising her children, I loaded my car, believing I had kept my sister's family afloat. But before I even turned the key, my phone lit up with Marissa's victory lap, a photo of my empty room captioned, "Finally, the freeloader is gone." She wanted likes. She didn't realize she had just handed me the evidence I would need to survive. The guest room in my sister Marissa's house always smelled faintly of lavender detergent and passive aggression. It was a perfectly nice room, painted a shade of beige that Marissa called sand dollar, with a window that looked out over the manicured lawns of Glen Haven, Pennsylvania. But for 2 years, I had woken up in that room with the heavy, suffocating knowledge that I was a line item in someone else's ledger, a debt that could never be fully repaid no matter how much money I transferred. I was 33 years old. I had a degree. I had a decade of experience in operations management. I was a competent, functioning adult who had simply hit a streak of bad luck that stripped the gears of my life. A corporate layoff had taken my income, and a breakup with a man I thought I was going to marry had taken my apartment and my equilibrium. When Marissa offered the spare room, I had cried with gratitude. I thought it was a lifeline. 2 years later, I knew it was a cage. The morning I moved out began like every other morning. I woke up at 6 so I could be out of the bathroom before Marissa's husband, Dale, needed to shower. I went downstairs to the kitchen, skirting the creaky floorboard in the hallway, and started the coffee. By the time Marissa came down, her 2 children, Leo and Sophie, were already eating the oatmeal I had made, and their lunchboxes were packed and sitting on the counter. Marissa walked in, tightening the belt of her silk robe. She looked tired, but she always looked tired in a way that demanded sympathy. She poured a cup of coffee and leaned against the granite island, watching me wipe down the stove. "You are up early," she said. "It is moving day," I said, keeping my voice light. I wanted to get a head start before the truck comes. Marissa blew on her coffee. "Right, I forgot that was today." She hadn't forgotten. We had discussed it every day for 3 weeks. I had shown her the lease agreement for the apartment. I had asked for boxes. I had arranged the date specifically so it wouldn't interfere with her hosting her book club. I turned to face her. I transferred the money for the utilities last night, and I left the prorated amount for this week on the counter. Marissa waved a hand dismissively. "You act like I am a landlord. Violet, you are my sister." The words sounded warm, but the temperature in the room didn't change. This was the dance we did. She insisted I was family, but she treated me like a tenant on probation. "I just want to make sure we are square," I said. Marissa sighed. A long, tragic sound. "You know, Dale and I were talking. We are going to miss having the extra help around here, with the kids." I looked at Leo and Sophie. They were 7 and 9, loud and messy and wonderful. I had picked them up from school 4 days a week. I had helped with homework. I had mediated fights over the iPad. I loved them fiercely. I will still see them. I said, "I am only moving across town. It is not the same." Marissa said. She took a sip of coffee and looked over the rim of the mug. "Just make sure you check the bathroom before you go. The last time you cleaned it. There were streaks on the mirror." I nodded. "I will check." I went back to scrubbing a spot on the counter that was already clean. This was the reality of my life in Glen Haven. To the outside world, Marissa was the saint who had taken in her wayward younger sister. She told stories at dinner parties about the burden of family, about how she had to sacrifice her privacy to help me get back on my feet. But the reality was in the bank transfers, every month, on the 1st. I sent Marissa $600. It wasn't market rate for a room in Glen Haven, but it was significant for someone who was piecing together income from freelance consulting gigs while hunting for full-time work. I pulled out my phone to check the notification from the payment app. I had sent the money the night before. Sent to Marissa. $600. Memo. Help. That was the rule. Marissa was adamant about the memo line. Don't put rent. She had told me the first month. And don't put utilities. Why? I had asked. Because I don't want it to look like income, she had said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If you write rent, the IRS might get involved. Just write help or groceries. It is better for everyone. It felt wrong, but I was in no position to argue. I was the one sleeping in the beige room. I was the one who had lost my job. I was the guest. So I wrote help and groceries and thanks for 2 years. I created a digital paper trail that looked like charity, while my bank account bled out real money. I finished wiping the counter and looked at my sister. She was scrolling through her phone, her brow furrowed. "I am going to start loading the car," I said. Marissa didn't look up. "Okay, try not to let the heat out." I spent the next 3 hours moving my life into the back of my 10-year-old sedan. I didn't have much. The breakup had cost me most of my furniture, and 2 years in a single room had forced me to become a minimalist. I had boxes of books, a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and a few kitchen supplies I had bought myself. Every time I walked through the living room with a box. Marissa was there, but she never offered to hold a door. She sat on the sofa, watching television or typing on her laptop. Dale was gone. He had conveniently scheduled a golf outing for that morning. It was heavy, physical work, but with every box I placed in the trunk, I felt a physical weight lifting off my chest. I had found a job. It wasn't the high-level director role I had held before the layoff, but it was a solid position with a logistics company called Arrowhead Supply. The pay was steady, the benefits were good, and the hiring manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, seemed kind. "We need someone who is reliable." "Mr. Henderson had said during the final interview, "Someone with a clean slate. We handle sensitive inventory. I have a clean slate." I had promised him. The offer was conditional on a background and credit check, but I wasn't worried. My credit score had taken a hit when I lost my job. But I had never missed a payment on my cards. Even during the lean months, I was debt-averse and cautious. I was the person who read the terms and conditions. I signed the lease on a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. It was small, and the carpet was a questionable shade of green, but it was mine. My name was on the door. My key opened the lock when the last box was in the car. I went back inside to say goodbye. The house was quiet. The kids were at school. Marissa was in the kitchen, organizing the pantry. She turned when I walked in. "All done?" she asked. "All done," I said. I put the house key on the counter. "Thank you, Marissa, for everything. I know it wasn't easy having me here." Marissa looked at the key, then at me. Her expression softened. Just a fraction. It is what family does. "Violet, we help each other, even when it is hard." I waited for a hug, or a congratulations, or a good luck. Instead, she picked up the key and dropped it into a ceramic bowl near the fridge. "Make sure you update your address," she said. "I don't want your junk mail piling up here." "I will," I said. I walked out the front door and down the driveway. I didn't look back. I got into my car, turned the key, and felt the engine shudder to life. As I pulled away from the curb, I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to cry, but I wasn't sure if it was from sadness or relief. I was 33, starting over with nothing but a car full of boxes and a job that started on Monday. I drove to the new apartment in silence. The city of Glen Haven passed by the window. The upscale strip malls, the meticulously landscaped parks, the sense of orderly, expensive calm. I was leaving the wealthy side of town for the working-class district, and the further I drove, the more I felt like I could breathe. My new building was a brick walk-up with a shared laundry room and a dumpster out back that was currently overflowing. It was beautiful. I spent the afternoon unloading. I carried the boxes up 2 flights of stairs, my muscles aching, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. By 4 o'clock, I was exhausted. I sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating a granola bar and drinking lukewarm water from the tap. I was alone. The silence was absolute. No television blaring cartoons, no passive-aggressive comments about the dishwasher loading, no feeling of being watched. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I hadn't checked it in hours. The screen was full of notifications. Texts from friends I hadn't heard from in months. A message from my cousin in Ohio, and a dozen notifications from Facebook. My stomach dropped. I wasn't a heavy social media user. I checked it occasionally to see baby photos or birthday announcements. A sudden influx of activity usually meant something bad had happened. I opened the app. The first thing I saw was the photo. It was my room, the room I had just vacated. Marissa must have taken the picture 5 minutes after I drove away. The bed was stripped to the mattress. The floor was vacuumed. The walls were bare. The lighting was stark, making the room look barren and cold, like a cell that had been abandoned. Above the photo, Marissa had written a caption. "Finally, the freeloader is gone. Peace is back in my house. It is amazing how much lighter the energy feels when you are not carrying dead weight. Blessed family drama fresh start." I stared at the words, freeloader, dead weight. My breath hitched. I read it again, hoping I had misunderstood. But the words were clear. I looked at the timestamps. She had posted it 3 hours ago. It already had 40 likes. I scrolled down to the comments. A neighbor, a woman named Janice, who I had made small talk with while getting the mail, had written, "So sorry you had to deal with that. Marissa, you have the patience of a saint." Marissa had replied, "Thanks, Janice. We tried our best. Some people just don't want to be helped." A cousin from our father's side, someone I hadn't seen since a funeral 5 years ago, wrote, "Love you, Rissa. You did more than anyone else would have." And then, a comment from one of Marissa's high school friends. "Is that the sister? The one who lost her job? Yikes. Did she ever pay you back?" Marissa's reply, "LOL. Let's just say I am not holding my breath." My hands started to shake. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck, a physical reaction to the public shaming. It wasn't just the lie that hurt. It was the casual cruelty of it. She had waited until I was gone, until I couldn't defend myself in person. And then she had rewritten the history of the last 2 years. I thought about the $600 a month. I thought about the groceries I bought every Tuesday. The milk, the cereal, the expensive organic snacks for the kids. I thought about the gas money I spent driving her children to soccer practice because she had a headache. Freeloader. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type a furious comment, listing every dollar I had transferred, every chore I had done. I wanted to post the screenshots of the Venmo transactions, but I stopped. I looked at the post again, the way the photo was framed, the carefully chosen hashtags, the way she was engaging with every comment, playing the victim, soaking up the validation. She was enjoying this. If I commented, I would look defensive. I would look like the unstable, ungrateful sister she was painting me to be. My phone buzzed with a text. It was my Aunt Linda. "Violet, what is going on?" I saw Marissa's post. "What did you do to your sister?" I stared at the screen. "What did you do?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Is it true?" Marissa had won the narrative before I even knew we were fighting. I didn't reply to my aunt. I didn't reply to the comments. Instead, I took a screenshot of the post. Then I took screenshots of the comments. I saved them to a folder on my phone. I stood up and paced around the small living room. The joy of the new apartment had evaporated, replaced by a sick, churning anxiety. It is just Facebook. I told myself, it is just stupid internet drama. It doesn't matter. I tried to focus on unpacking. I put my books on the built-in shelves. I made my bed. I tried to reclaim the space, to push Marissa's voice out of my head. By the time evening came, I had managed to calm down. I ordered a pizza and sat on the floor, watching the sunset through the blinds. I told myself that tomorrow was a new day. I had a job. I had a home. Marissa could have her likes and her comments. I was free. I slept fitfully that night, dreaming of empty rooms and laughter I couldn't locate. The next morning, I woke up determined to move forward. I had onboarding paperwork to fill out for Arrowhead Supply. I needed to set up my utilities. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Arrowhead Supply HR. I smiled. This was likely just a confirmation of my start time for Monday. "Hello? This is Violet," I answered, projecting my most professional voice. "Hi, Violet. This is Sarah from Human Resources." "Hi, Sarah, I am excited to get started next week. There was a pause on the other end, a pause that lasted 2 seconds too long. Violet, actually, I am calling because we need to push back your start date. My smile faltered. Oh? Is there a problem with the paperwork? Not exactly. Sarah said. Her voice was awkward, cautious. Something came up during the final review process. We are pausing all new hires in your department for a moment, just to review some things. I frowned. I hadn't heard anything about a hiring freeze during the interview. Mr. Henderson had said they were desperate for people. Mr. Henderson said the position was urgent. I said, Is this regarding the background check? There was a rustling of papers on the line. We just need a little more time, Sarah said. Avoiding the question, we will be in touch next week, but we will call you. Violet, have a good weekend. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Something came up. My mind raced. I had no criminal record. My driving record was clean. My credit was bruised, but not disqualifying. Then I thought of the Facebook post. Glen Haven was not a small city, but it was a connected one. Marissa's husband, Dale, played golf with half the business owners in town. Marissa was on the PTA. Arrowhead Supply was a local company. I opened Facebook again. Marissa's post had been shared 3 times. One of the shares was by a woman whose husband worked in logistics. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Freeloader. If an employer saw that, if they saw a public declaration that I was dishonest, lazy, a burden, would they hire me? In a role that required handling inventory and managing schedules? The humiliation wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a tangible threat. It was touching my livelihood. I stood up and walked to the window. Down on the street, a delivery truck rumbled past. I could call Marissa. I could beg her to take it down. I could apologize for whatever imaginary slight had caused this. Just to make the bleeding stop. That was what the old Violet would have done. The Violet who lived in the guest room and wrote help on the memo line. But I wasn't in the guest room anymore. I looked at the phone in my hand. I thought about the tone of Sarah's voice. Awkward, cautious. They hadn't rescinded the offer yet. They were pausing. They were unsure. If I lashed out now, if I posted a rant calling Marissa a liar, I would only confirm the chaos. I would look like exactly what she claimed I was. A problem. I needed to be something else. I sat down at my laptop and opened a new document. I named it Timeline. I typed the date. September 15th. Moved into Marissa and Dale's home. I logged into my bank account. I filtered the search results for transfers to Marissa. There they were. A long, unbroken column of payments. October 1st, $600. November 1st, $600. December 1st, $600. I took screenshots of every single one. I pasted them into the document. Then I went to my email. I searched for the grocery receipts I had emailed to myself for budgeting. I found dozens of them. Receipts for milk, bread, eggs, wine for Marissa's parties, cleaning supplies. I pasted those too. I worked for hours. I dug through 2 years of digital history. I found text messages where Marissa asked me to pick up the kids. Texts where she asked me to wait for the plumber. Texts where she thanked me for buying the teacher appreciation gifts because she didn't have the cash right now. By the time I was done, I had a 20-page document. It was boring. It was dry. It was just facts. But as I scrolled through it, looking at the undeniable proof of my contribution, the shame began to recede. Marissa's post was confident. It was loud. It had likes and hearts and laughing emojis. But my document had dates. It had dollar amounts. It had truth. I looked at the screenshot of the Facebook post one last time. Finally, the freeloader is gone. She was right about one thing. I was gone, and she had no idea what I was taking with me. I closed the laptop. I didn't call Marissa. I didn't call the HR department back yet. I needed to wait. I needed to see how far she would go, because something about her confidence felt practiced. It felt like she wasn't just venting. It felt like she was planting a flag. And if she was planting a flag, It meant she was defending territory. I looked around my empty apartment. I had 1 month of savings left. I had a job offer hanging by a thread. I had a sister who was actively trying to destroy my reputation. I took a deep breath. Okay, Marissa, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see who owns the truth. The Glen Haven Municipal Records Office was located in the basement of the City Hall, a building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I went there on a Tuesday morning, wearing my only blazer, clutching a folder of my resume copies as if they were a shield. I did not really need to be there. The job offer at Arrowhead Supply was paused, not rescinded, and technically, a records clerk could not tell me why a background check was taking so long, but I needed to do something. Sitting in my apartment, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring, was driving me insane. I approached the counter. The woman behind the glass was older, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses suspended on a beaded chain. Her name tag read, Mrs. Higgins. She was stamping forms with a rhythmic, heavy thud-thud that echoed in the quiet room. "Can I help you?" she asked. Not looking up, I cleared my throat. "I know this is an unusual question." I said, "But I recently applied for a job, and the background check is pending. I was wondering if there is any way to see if there is anything on my public record that might be flagging it." Mrs. Higgins stopped stamping. She looked over her glasses at me. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and tired. "We do not run background checks for employers here," she said. "That is usually a third-party service." "I know," I said quickly. I moved recently. I wanted to make sure there were no clerical errors, or liens, or anything like that. I felt foolish saying it. I knew I had no liens. I paid my bills. But the silence from Arrowhead Supply had planted a seed of paranoia in my chest that was growing into a vine. Choking off my logic, Mrs. Higgins sighed, but it was not unkind. She pushed a clipboard toward me. "You can pull your own public property and tax records," she said. "It is public information. Most people never look. You would be surprised what is attached to people." "What do you mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "Old judgments, co-signed loans people forgot about, names attached to deeds they did not know they were on. Mistakes. It happens. If you are worried, start with a standard credit pull and a county record search." She pointed to a computer terminal in the corner. "You can search the county database there. It is free." "Thank you," I said. I sat at the terminal. The screen was flickering slightly. I typed in my name, Violet Morgan. The search wheel spun. No property deeds found. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Of course there were no deeds. I did not own anything. I was a renter. I was a freeloader, according to the internet. I stood up to leave. But Mrs. Higgins's words stuck in my head. "You would be surprised what is attached to people." I went back to my apartment. The silence of the place was still jarring. I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, a folding card table I had bought at a thrift store because I could not afford a real one yet. I opened my laptop. I decided to order a full credit report. I had not looked at the detailed version in 2 years, not since before the layoff. I used one of the free annual services. I answered the security questions. What was the name of your first pet? What is the street you grew up on? And waited for the PDF to generate. It appeared on the screen, a dense wall of numbers and text. I scrolled through the basics. Student loans, paid off, credit cards, current. Though the balances were higher than I liked, car payment, current. Then I got to the section labeled Inquiries. There were the standard ones, the credit card I had applied for last year, the inquiry from the landlord for my new apartment, but there was another one. Lender, Valley Ridge Financial. Date, November 14th, 2 years ago. Type, home equity/mortgage. I stared at the date, November 14th. That was 3 weeks after I had moved into Marissa's house. I had been in a fog back then. I had just lost my job. I was sleeping on an air mattress in the guest room while waiting for Marissa to clear out the closet. I had definitely not applied for a home equity loan. I did not have a home to have equity in. Valley Ridge Financial. I knew that bank. It was a local institution that had recently been bought out by a larger national chain. Marissa banked there. My stomach gave a lurch. Why would a bank run a credit check on me for a mortgage product 3 weeks after I moved into my sister's house? I told myself not to panic. It could be a mistake. Maybe I had applied for a credit card with them and forgotten. But the code was specific. Home equity. I picked up my phone. I needed to ask her. I hesitated. Since the Facebook post, we had not spoken. I had not liked the post, and I had not commented. The silence between us was heavy and loaded with unsaid things. But this was financial. This was my credit report. I dialed her number. It rang 4 times. I thought she was going to screen me, but then the line clicked open. Hello? Her voice was bright, breezy, too bright. It was the voice she used when she was performing for an audience, or when she was pretending everything was fine. Hi, Marissa, I said. Oh, Violet. Hi, I was just telling Dale we needed to have you over for dinner once you get settled. How is the new place? The normalcy of it threw me off, as if she hadn't posted a picture of my empty room and called me a parasite 3 days ago. The place is fine, I said. Listen, Marissa, I have a quick question. I was going over my credit report today. The line went quiet, not dead, just still. Oh? She said. Her tone shifted. It became guarded. Why are you doing that? I am just organizing my finances. I said. I noticed an inquiry from Valley Ridge Financial from 2 years ago. From right after I moved in with you. It is listed as a home equity inquiry. I waited. Marissa laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. Violet, honestly, you are looking at things from 2 years ago? I am just trying to understand it. I said, I never applied for anything at Valley Ridge. Did you? Did we ever put anything in my name? Maybe for utilities? Or something for the house? I tried to give her an out. I tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding. Marissa sighed. The sound of a patient parent dealing with a slow child. You are being paranoid. Violet, we never put the house in your name. You know that. It is probably just a glitch. Or maybe you applied for a store credit card that is backed by them. You were applying for a lot of things back then. You were pretty scattered. I wasn't that scattered, I said, my voice tightening. And it says, home equity. You are looking for villains, she cut in. Her voice was cold now. You are looking for villains because your life did not go how you wanted. And you need someone to blame. Just like you blame me for the job thing. I never said, I know you. Violet, you are stewing. You are sitting in that apartment, probably feeling sorry for yourself, and you want to make this into some big drama. It is a credit check. It does not mean anything. Let it go. She hung up. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. You are looking for villains. Was I? For a moment, I doubted myself. Marissa was good at that. She had a way of saying things with such absolute conviction that my own reality would blur around the edges. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe it was a mistake. But the unease didn't leave. It sat in my gut like a stone. 2 days later, the mail arrived. I unlocked my small metal mailbox in the lobby of my building. Inside was a bundle of coupons, a flyer for a pizza place, and a stiff white envelope with a green card attached to the back. Certified mail. My heart hammered against my ribs. Certified mail was never good news. It was legal notices. It was IRS audits. It was bad news that wanted proof it had been delivered. I looked at the return address, County of Glen Haven, Tax Claim Bureau. I walked up the stairs to my apartment. My legs feeling heavy, I sat on the sofa and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. Notice of intent to file claim, re. Delinquent property taxes. Property address. 424 Maplewood Drive. Glen Haven. PA 424 Maplewood Drive. That was Marissa's house. I scanned the letter, my eyes jumping over the legalese. Delinquent amount, $4,200. Failure to respond. Lien on property. And then, at the bottom, Authorized contact/responsible party on file. Violet Morgan. I dropped the letter on the coffee table. I was not the owner. I knew that. Marissa and Dale owned the house. But why was I getting a delinquent tax notice? And why was I listed as a responsible party? I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the letterhead. My hands were shaking so badly I misdialed the first time. Glenhaven tax claim. A woman's voice answered. Hi, I said. My voice sounded thin. I just received a certified letter. My name is Violet Morgan. The reference number is... I read her the number. I heard typing in the background. Okay. Ms. Morgan, the woman said. I see the file here. This is regarding the 424 Maplewood property. We show a balance of $4,200 for the previous tax year. We sent the initial notices to the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Shelby, but we did not receive a response. Since you are listed as the authorized signer for the installment plan, we are notifying you that the agreement is in default. Installment plan? I asked. What installment plan? The agreement dated 18 months ago, she said. To pay the back taxes in monthly installments, you signed the affidavit accepting responsibility for receiving notifications and ensuring compliance. I didn't, I stammered. I don't own the house. You do not have to be the owner to be the contact on a payment plan, she explained. It just requires a resident to vouch for the correspondence. We have your digital signature on file. My digital signature. I felt the room spin. Can you send me a copy of that document? I asked. I can email it to you. She said, verify your email address? I gave it to her. 5 minutes later, my inbox pinged. I opened the attachment. It was a standard county form, tax installment agreement, and there, at the bottom, was a digital stamp, signed, Violet Morgan. Date, March 3rd, last year. I stared at it. I remembered March. I was working 2 freelance gigs. I was exhausted. I was running the household because Marissa had chronic migraines that month. I opened my email search bar. I typed in Marissa and sign. Dozens of emails came up. Marissa was allergic to paperwork. She was always forwarding me things to handle. School permission slips for the kids. Contractor estimates. I narrowed the search to March of last year. There it was. An email from Marissa. Subject, FWD, verification thingy. Date, March 3rd. Hey Vi, can you sign this real quick? It is just the occupancy verification for the school district, so Sophie can stay in the honors program. They need a second adult resident to verify address. Thanks. Attached was a PDF. I clicked on it. It wasn't the tax form. It was a generic-looking form titled Residency Affidavit. But as I looked closer at the metadata of the file, something I had learned to do in my old operations job, I saw that the file name in the system didn't match the title on the page and the signature link she had sent. It was a DocuSign link. I clicked the link in the old email. It was expired. Of course. But I remembered clicking it back then. I remembered seeing a box that said, "Click to sign." I remembered Marissa standing in the doorway of my room, holding a basket of laundry. "Did you get that link?" she had asked. "Sophie's teacher is harassing me about it." I did. I had said, "I am clicking it now." I had clicked. I had not read the fine print. I trusted my sister. She said it was for Sophie. She said it was for the school. I looked back at the tax document the clerk had sent me. The timestamp matched exactly. She had baited me. She had sent me a link for one thing, described it as another, and I had blindly signed my name to a tax repayment plan for a house I didn't own. Why? Why would she do that? Because if she defaulted, which she obviously had, the notices would come to me, not to Dale, not to her. The threats would land in my lap. It bought her time. It kept her credit slightly cleaner for slightly longer. It made me the buffer. I stood up and walked to the kitchen sink. I felt sick, physically sick. This wasn't just laziness. This was architectural. This was a design. How many other things had I signed? I thought about the help memos on the Venmo payments. I thought about the credit inquiry. I was not a guest. I was a shield. I needed a lawyer. I could not afford a lawyer. My savings were dwindling. and I had no income. But I remembered seeing a flyer at the library for the Glen Haven Community Justice Center. Legal aid. I drove there immediately. I didn't call for an appointment. I just went. The office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a discount shoe store and a check cashing place. The waiting room was crowded with people who looked tired and worried. I took a number and sat in a plastic chair that wobbled. I waited for 2 hours. Finally, a young woman called my name. Violet Morgan? I followed her back to a small, cramped office. Behind the desk sat a woman who looked like she ran on caffeine and righteous indignation. She had short, spiky hair and a blazer that had seen better days. "I am attorney Sarah Jenkins," she said. "What brings you in?" I sat down and laid the certified letter on the desk. Then I laid the printout of the email from Marissa. Then I laid the credit report. "I think my sister stole my identity," I said, "but she did it while I was living in her house, and she made me sign things." Attorney Jenkins picked up the letter. She put on a pair of reading glasses and scanned it. Then she looked at the email. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. "We see this a lot," she said. "Family fraud. It is the hardest kind to prosecute because the victim usually participated, unknowingly or partially." She leaned back in her chair. "Here is the situation. Violet, you are listed here as an authorized signer and a contact party. You are not the owner of the property, so the county cannot seize your assets to pay the taxes. They can't take your car or your bank account for this debt." I exhaled. Thank God. "However," she continued, holding up a finger, "this attaches you to the property records. It associates your name with delinquency. It can appear on background checks, specifically the deeper ones used for government or security-sensitive jobs. It suggests financial instability, Arrowhead Supply, and," she said, tapping the credit report, "this inquiry is more concerning. A home equity inquiry means someone applied for a loan using your credentials. If they were denied, it just shows as an inquiry. If they were approved, well, we need to find out if there is a loan out there with your name on it as a co-borrower or guarantor. But I never signed loan documents." I said, "Did you ever sign a power of attorney?" she asked. "Or a blank notary form? Or anything on an iPad where you couldn't see the whole page?" I thought about the 2 years, the blur of papers, the "help me with this, Vi." I don't know," I whispered. Attorney Jenkins looked at me with sympathy, but it was a hard, clear-eyed sympathy. "Violet, there is a difference between being a victim and being a volunteer. Up until now, you have been a volunteer because you trusted her. The law looks at your signature and assumes you read what you signed. Proving fraud when you click the button is difficult. So what do I do?" I asked. I felt tears pricking my eyes, not tears of sadness, but tears of frustration. I was an educated woman. How had I let this happen? "First, you stop signing things," she said, obviously. "Second, you need to pull the actual files from the bank and the county, not just the summaries, the source documents. We need to see the signatures. If they are digital, we need the audit trails. If they are wet signatures, pen on paper, we need to see if they match yours." She handed the papers back to me. "Marissa isn't just using you for rent money, Violet. She is using your identity as a fresh resource. Her credit is likely shot. Dale's is probably maxed out. You were the fresh battery they plugged into their machine to keep the lights on. The fresh battery." The image made my stomach turn. I left the legal aid office with a to-do list. Request hard copies of tax affidavit. Contact Valley Ridge Financial Legal Department. Freeze credit. I drove home in a daze. The rage was starting to build now. It was a slow, hot burn in the center of my chest. She had called me a freeloader. She had posted that picture. She had humiliated me publicly to cover her tracks. It was a preemptive strike. If she painted me as the villain first, then anything I said later would look like revenge. "Oh, Violet is just making up stories about taxes because she is bitter." I kicked her out. It was brilliant. It was evil. I got back to my apartment and sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I felt shame washing over me. The shame was sharper than the anger. It was a personal indictment. I had prided myself on being the responsible one, the one who fixed things. when our parents died. I was the one who handled the estate. I was the one who made sure the funeral was paid for. Marissa had fallen apart, and I had held her up, and she had looked at me, at my grief, at my vulnerability after the layoff. And she hadn't seen a sister. She had seen a resource. She had seen a credit score she could harvest. I opened my phone. I shouldn't have, but I did. I went to Facebook. Marissa had posted again. It was a meme, a picture of a lighthouse standing amidst crashing waves. The text over the image read, "Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Some people drain you dry and then blame you for being empty. Sending love to everyone who is learning to say no to toxicity." The caption read, "Choosing peace today. It is hard to cut ties, but sometimes you have to protect your own home. Growth healing, no more freeloaders." I stared at the screen. She was doubling down. She was building a fortress of words, using the language of therapy and self-care to mask a con. There were 50 likes. People were commenting, "So proud of you. Marissa, you are so strong. Toxic family is the worst." They had no idea. They saw a tired mother finally standing up for herself. They didn't see the certified letters. They didn't see the forged intent. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to drive to her house and scream on her lawn. But I heard Attorney Jenkins' voice in my head. Proving fraud is difficult. If I screamed, I was the crazy sister. If I posted, I was the bitter sister. I needed to be the cold sister. I needed to be the sister who kept receipts. I put the phone down gently on the table. My hands were still shaking, but the shaking was changing frequency. It wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. I went to my laptop. I opened the timeline document I had started. I added a new entry. 2 years ago, Valley Ridge Financial Home Equity Inquiry. Last year, March 3rd. Tax installment agreement signed via deceptively labeled link. Today, certified notice of intent received. I looked at the list. It was growing. I remembered the box of papers I had taken from my father's house when he died. It was still in storage, or maybe in the back of my closet. Dad had been paranoid about paperwork. He kept everything. He had always told us, "Marissa has a good heart, but she has a slippery memory." He had known. I closed my eyes. "Okay, Marissa," I thought, "you want to talk about boundaries? Let's look at the survey lines." I stood up and went to the kitchen. I poured the cold tea down the sink. I washed the cup. I dried it. I put it away. I was done being the guest. I was done being the battery. Tomorrow, I was going to the bank, and I wasn't going to ask nicely. The manila envelope from the Glenhaven Tax Claim Bureau sat on my kitchen table like an unexploded ordnance. I had requested the full file, not just the digital summary the clerk had emailed me, but the scan of the physical affidavit that supposedly authorized the payment plan. I made myself a cup of black coffee before I opened it. I needed the bitterness to sharpen my senses. The morning light was filtering through the blinds of my new apartment, casting striped shadows across the cheap laminate floor. It was quiet. No kids screaming, no TV blaring, no Marissa sighing loudly in the hallway. Just the silence of a life that was finally, precariously, mine. I slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife. Inside was a photocopy of a document titled Affidavit of Residency and Financial Responsibility. I scanned the text. It was standard legalese. I, the undersigned, acknowledge responsibility for receiving notices. My eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. There was a signature line. On it was written, Violet Morgan. I stared at it. It was my name. It was written in blue ink. It had the loops and slants of my handwriting. The V was tall. The G in Morgan had the specific tail I always used. But it wasn't my signature. It was a drawing of my signature. It looked shaky. The lines slightly hesitant, as if the hand holding the pen had been moving slower than a natural writer moves. It was the uncanny valley of handwriting, close enough to fool a clerk glancing at it for 2 seconds, but obvious to the person who had signed her name thousands of times. I had not signed this. I looked at the date next to the signature. February 12th. February 12th. I checked my phone calendar, scrolling back a year. On February 12th, I had been in bed with the flu. I remembered it vividly because Marissa had been annoyed that I couldn't drive the kids to school. I hadn't left the house for 3 days, and yet, below the signature, there was a stamp. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Notary. Public Lakeside. Mail and Print Commission expires May 2024. A notary seal meant that a licensed official had watched me sign this. They had asked for my ID. They had verified my face against the plastic card. I felt a cold flush of nausea. My first instinct was to grab my phone and dial 911. This was a crime. This was forgery. This was identity theft. Someone, and I knew exactly who, had walked into a notary office, pretended to be me, and signed a legal document attaching me to a tax debt. I dialed the number for the legal aid office instead. Attorney Jenkins picked up on the third ring. She sounded harried, papers rustling in the background. "Jenkins," she barked. "It is Violet Morgan." I said, my voice was trembling. "I got the documents. It is a forgery, a notarized forgery." There was a pause on the line. The rustling stopped. "Describe it," she said. I told her about the shaky handwriting. I told her about the date when I was sick in bed. I told her about the notary stamp from Lakeside Mail and Print. "I am calling the police." I said, "I want to file a report right now." "No," Jenkins said. Her voice was sharp. "Do not call the police yet." "Why not?" I demanded. "It is a crime, because right now, it is a domestic dispute." She said, "You live in the house, or you did. The police will show up. Marissa will say you signed it and just forgot, or that you gave her verbal permission. It becomes he said, she said. The police in Glenhaven do not like getting involved in family money fights unless there is smoking gun proof. They will write a report saying it is a civil matter and walk away, and then Marissa knows, you know." I gripped the phone tighter. "So I just let her get away with it?" "No," Jenkins said. "We build the trap first, then we spring it. You need to prove you were not there. Go to the notary." "The notary?" "Every notary is required by law to keep a logbook," Jenkins explained. "A journal. For every stamp they use, they have to record the date, the time, the type of document, and the method of identification. They have to write down the driver's license number of the person standing in front of them. I understood immediately. If someone pretended to be me, what ID did they show? "Go to Lakeside Mail and Print," Jenkins instructed. "Do not be aggressive. Be confused. Ask to see the entry for that date. You have a right to see records pertaining to your own signature. Get a copy of that log entry." I hung up the phone. I put on my coat. I didn't even finish the coffee. Lakeside Mail and Print was a small shop in a strip mall on the edge of town, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. It smelled of cardboard and packing tape. The bell above the door chimed as I walked in. The counter was manned by a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a stained polo shirt. He was taping up a box for a customer. I waited until the customer left. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made my hands sweat. "Can I help you?" the man asked. He looked tired. "Hi," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I have a question about a document that was notarized here a while ago. There seems to be some confusion with the county, and I just need to verify the log entry." The man sighed. He pointed to a sign on the wall. "Notary services, $10. "I don't need a notary." I said, "I need to check the journal. My name is Violet Morgan. The document was dated February 12th of last year." He hesitated. "Why do you need to see it?" "Because I didn't sign it." I said, "And the county says I did." His eyes widened slightly. He looked at me, then at the computer screen, then back at me. He wasn't a villain. He was just a small business owner who suddenly smelled a lawsuit. "Let me check the book," he said. He went into a back office and came out with a thick bound ledger. He flipped through the pages. February 12th. He muttered. He stopped. He ran his finger down the page. "Here it is," he said. "Affidavit, Violet Morgan." He turned the book around so I could see. There was the entry. Type of doc. Affidavit. Name, Violet Morgan. Address, 424 Maplewood Drive. And next to it, the column for identification. ID. Type, P, a driver's license. ID. Number. I looked at the number written there. I pulled my own license out of my wallet. My license number started with 24. The number in the book started with 24. But the last 4 digits, my license ended in 8901. The number in the book ended in 8910. It was off by 2 digits. Transposed? Does that match? The owner asked. No, I said, that is not my license number. He looked at my card. He looked at the book. He paled. Who was the notary? I asked. The signature at the bottom of the log entry was a scrawl I couldn't read. He squinted at it. That was Brenda. She was a part-timer. She doesn't work here anymore. I looked at him. Did she get fired? He looked uncomfortable. We had some issues with attention to detail. I felt a wave of sickness. Attention to detail. That was a polite way of saying she didn't check IDs carefully. Or maybe she was easily charmed. Or maybe she was just busy. Marissa. I could picture it perfectly. Marissa walking in, holding the paper. Maybe she had a blonde wig. We looked enough alike that from a distance, or to a careless clerk, we could pass. Or maybe she had brought a fake ID. Or maybe she had just fast-talked Brenda. Oh, my sister is in the car. She's sick. Can I just bring it out to her? Oh, I forgot my ID. But you know me, right? I come in here all the time to ship packages. However she did it, she had exploited a weakness in the system. Can I get a copy of this page? I asked. The owner hesitated, then nodded. He knew he was in trouble. If his employee had notarized a forgery, his bond was liable. Yeah, he said, just don't mention my shop if you don't have to. I didn't promise anything. I took the photocopy. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the photocopy, the transposed numbers, 8910 instead of 8901. It was a mistake, a tiny clerical mistake made by a fraudster or a sloppy notary, but it was the thread that unraveled the whole sweater. I drove home slowly. My mind was racing, connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see before. Why now? Why did she do this 2 years ago? I thought about Dale. Dale was a man who always had a project. He had been a real estate agent, then a crypto investor, and recently he had started a consulting firm. I never really knew what he consulted on. 2 years ago, right around February, Dale had come home with a brand new truck, a Ford F-150, fully loaded, leather seats, extended cab, business expense, he had said, beaming. Gotta look the part to get the clients. I remembered Marissa complaining about their credit cards being maxed out. I remembered her saying they couldn't refinance the house because their debt-to-income ratio was too high. And then, suddenly, they had the truck. And suddenly, the tax issue was handled. They had needed a ghost. They needed someone with a clean credit history, me, to take the weight of the tax liability off their profile so they could qualify for the truck loan or the refinance. By shifting the responsibility for the taxes to an installment plan in my name, they technically cleared the delinquency from their immediate view. I was the anchor. They had chained their debts to my ankles so they could float. I got back to my apartment and my phone buzzed. It was Tessa. Tessa Lang had been my best friend since college. She was the only person outside the family I had told about the eviction, though I hadn't told her the full extent of the fraud yet. Hey. Her text read, "Are you okay? I saw you online." I called her. Tessa. I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be brutally honest with me." Violet? You sound weird. I found out Marissa forged my signature. I said, "I just need to know. What has she been telling people? About me? About living there?" There was a long silence on the other end. Tessa sighed. Vi. Honestly? I said, "She's been playing the martyr for a long time." Tessa said quietly, "Even before you moved out. She would come to brunch with the girls and talk about how expensive it was to support another adult. She made it sound like you were paying nothing. Like zero. I felt the blood drain from my face. I paid $600 a month. Every month. I know, Tessa said. I mean, I assumed you were paying something, but she would say things like, "Oh, I can't order the mimosa. I have to buy extra groceries for Violet this week." She made you sound helpless and entitled. Entitled? She told people she was too kind to ask you for rent. Tessa continued. She said she didn't want to kick you when you were down. Everyone thought she was a saint. Vi. I closed my eyes. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was reputation. It was a character assassination that had been going on for 2 years, slow and steady, like arsenic in the water supply. She had poisoned the well so that when the day came, the day I left, or the day I found out, no one would believe me. I was the leech. She was the host. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My voice sounded dead. "Vi, what are you going to do?" Tessa asked. "You have to defend yourself. You should post the receipts." "No," I said. "Not yet." I hung up. Attorney Jenkins was right. A Facebook war would just look like a catfight. She said, I needed to be a glacier. Slow, massive, and undeniable. I went to my desk. I took out a fresh 3-ring binder. I had bought it for my new job. The job that was currently paused. I labeled the spine. V. Morgan versus evidence. I punched holes in the photocopy of the notary log. I clicked it into the binder. I punched holes in the tax affidavit. Click. I punched holes in the credit report showing the unauthorized inquiry. Click. Then I opened my bank statements. I printed every single month from the last 2 years. I highlighted the transfers to Marissa. January, $600. February, $600. March, $600. I printed the text messages where she asked for money. "Hey Vi, can you Venmo me for the electric bill? It is high this month." "Hey Vi, I am short for the grocery run. Can you shoot me 50? I organized them chronologically. It took me 4 hours. By the time I was done. The binder was 2 inches thick. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. I realized I had stopped checking the family group chat. My phone showed 40 unread messages from the Morgan family thread. I archived the chat without opening it. I was done engaging. Every word I typed there could be used against me. Silence was my new language. But there was one loose end I needed to tie up. I opened my email and composed a message to Sarah, the HR rep at Arrowhead Supply. "Dear Sarah, I hope you are having a good week. I am writing to follow up on the status of my employment offer. I understand there is a pause, but I would appreciate any clarity you can provide on the specific nature of the concern. If there is documentation I can provide to clarify any misunderstandings, I am eager to do so. Sincerely, Violet." I hit send. I didn't expect a reply. HR departments are trained to be vague to avoid lawsuits. But an hour later, a reply came. "Dear Violet, thank you for your patience. While we cannot disclose full details of internal deliberations, I can confirm that the pause is related to social concerns brought to our attention regarding online conduct and character discrepancies. We place a high value on community reputation. We will be making a final decision by Friday." There it was. Social concerns, online conduct, Marissa's post. She had cost me a job. That wasn't just mean. That was damages. That was tortious interference. I looked at the binder. I looked at my bank account balance. I had enough money to survive for 2 months if I ate ramen noodles. Or, I had enough money to hire a real lawyer for 5 hours. I thought about the furniture fund I had set aside. $2,000 I had saved to buy a real sofa and a bed frame. I looked at the air mattress I was currently sleeping on. "I can sleep on the floor," I said aloud. I picked up the phone and searched for Harker Wren Legal. I had heard of them. They were not legal aid. They were the firm you hired when you wanted to burn the ground so nothing would ever grow there again. They specialized in complex civil litigation and fraud. I called the number. Harker and Wren. "How may I direct your call?" "I need a consultation with an attorney specializing in identity fraud and property disputes." I said, "I have documentation. The consultation fee is $350. the receptionist said. "I will pay it." I said. 2 days later, I walked into the glass and steel office of Harker Wren. I met with a man named Elias Thorne. He was young, sharp, and wore a suit that cost more than my car. I laid the binder on his mahogany desk. He flipped through it. He didn't say anything for 10 minutes. He just turned the pages: the credit report, the notary log, the timeline of payments, the screenshots of the Facebook post, the email from HR. Finally, he looked up. "This is thorough." He said, "Is it enough?" I asked. He tapped the page with the notary log. This is fraud. This is a felony. And this," he pointed to the HR email, "this is quantifiable damages. She didn't just hurt your feelings. Ms. Morgan, she interfered with the contract of employment, and she did it while simultaneously defrauding the county and a bank in your name." He leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "We can file a civil suit. We can file a police report with this evidence attached, which forces them to investigate. We can go to the bank. I want my name off everything." I said, "I want the inquiries gone. I want the tax debt gone. And I want her to retract the statement that cost me my job." He nodded. "That is the baseline. But given the malice here, we might be looking at punitive damages too." I wrote him a check for a retainer. It drained my savings account to double digits. My hand shook as I signed it. Violet Morgan, my real signature, strong and sharp. I walked out of the office feeling lighter, but also terrified. I had just declared war. There was no going back now. I drove home in the rain. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. Slap, 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 slap. When I got to my apartment, I checked my email on my phone before getting out of the car. There was a new message. Sender: Calder Grove Estate Services. Subject: Estate of Robert Morgan. Sealed instruction. I frowned. My father, Robert, had died 4 years ago. The estate was settled. Marissa and I had split the small life insurance policy and the contents of the house. Why was I getting an email now? I opened it. "Dear Ms. Morgan, our records indicate a change of address for you has been filed with the municipal database. Per the instructions left by your late father, Robert Morgan, we are holding a sealed letter in our custody. Mr. Morgan's instructions were explicit. This letter is to be released to my daughter Violet only upon the condition that she no longer resides at the same address as her sister, Marissa. Since this condition has been met, please contact our office to arrange retrieval of the document." My heart stopped. Dad. He had left a letter that was time-delayed, a letter that was triggered by me moving out. Why? Why would he wait? "To protect you," a voice in my head whispered. He knew. Even back then, he knew. I stared at the rain sliding down the windshield. The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and red. My father had been a quiet man. He kept his own counsel. He watched, and apparently, he had seen something coming that I had been too blind to see myself. I put the car in park and turned off the engine. I sat in the dark, the phone glowing in my hand. The binder was in the passenger seat. The lawyer was hired. The evidence was gathered. But the real ammunition was waiting for me at Calder Grove Estate Services. I had thought I was fighting this battle alone. But as I looked at the email, I realized I wasn't. My father had left me a weapon. And he had waited until I was safe, until I was gone, to put it in my hands. Calder Grove Estate Services was located in a converted Victorian house on a street lined with oak trees that were older than the city itself. The air inside smelled of lemon polish and old dust, a scent that immediately reminded me of my father. He had been a man who respected paper, who believed that if something wasn't written down in black ink, it didn't exist. I sat in a leather wingback chair, my hands folded in my lap to stop them from trembling. Across from me sat Mr. Abernathy, the estate assistant. He was a young man with a serious face and a tie that was knotted too tightly. He placed a thick, cream-colored envelope on the desk between us. It was sealed with red wax. I hadn't seen wax seals used outside of movies. But my father had a flair for the dramatic when it came to security. As we discussed on the phone, Mr. Abernathy said, his voice hushed. Your father left this in our custody 7 years ago. The instruction was explicit. It was to be released only if you no longer resided at 424 Maplewood Drive. He pushed the envelope toward me. I picked it up. It had weight to it. On the front, in my father's blocky, engineer print, was written, For Violet. Read alone. I waited until I was back in my car to open it. I sat in the parking lot, the engine off, the windows rolled up against the damp afternoon chill. I broke the seal. Inside were 3 pages of handwritten text on yellow legal pad paper. My father never used fancy stationery. He liked the friction of a ballpoint pen on cheap paper. My dear Violet, if you are reading this, you are finally out of that house. I hope you left on your own terms, but I know your sister well enough to fear that you did not. I felt a lump form in my throat. He knew, even back then, when he was sick, when we were all pretending everything was fine, he knew. I am writing this because I am a coward. The letter continued. I should have fixed the imbalance while I was alive, but Marissa has a way of turning love into leverage. She makes you feel that asking for fairness is an act of betrayal. I let her do it to me, and I watched her do it to you. I wiped a tear from my cheek. You think the house is hers. You think the money from the settlement went to pay off my medical bills. That is the story she tells. But the truth is in the numbers. I was too weak to fight her when she demanded the deed be in her name alone. She said it was to protect the asset from my medical creditors. It was a lie. It was to secure her control. I have kept a record. I knew she would try to rewrite history. I knew she would try to make you feel like a guest in your own family. I kept your name off the loan documents intentionally. Violet, I fought her on that one thing. I told her it was to protect your credit score, but really, it was to protect you from being used as a tool. I did not want you chained to her debts. Go to First National Bank, box number 402. The key is taped to the bottom of this page. The authorization card is enclosed. Get what belongs to you. Love, Dad. I looked at the bottom of the page. A small brass key was taped there with Scotch tape that had yellowed with age. I drove straight to the bank. First National was the old stone building downtown, the one with the marble floors and the echo that made everyone whisper. I met with a bank officer, showed my ID, presented the death certificate and the authorization form from the letter. They led me into the vault. It was a room of steel walls and silence. The officer unlocked the box, slid the long metal drawer out, and carried it to a private viewing room. I will give you some privacy, she said, closing the door. I opened the lid. It wasn't filled with gold or cash. It was filled with paper. I pulled out a file folder labeled House Settlement. Inside was a copy of a cashier's check. Amount: $80,000. Payee: Marissa Shelby. Memo: Insurance settlement: Robert Morgan. $80,000. I remembered that time. I was 26. Marissa was 28. Dad had been injured at the plant, and there was a settlement. Marissa had told me the amount was $20,000. Just enough to cover his surgeries and some rehab. She said she was putting it into the house to keep a roof over Dad's head while he recovered. But the check was for $80,000. Beneath the check was a letter from my father to the bank, instructing the funds to be used as a down payment on the Maplewood property, and below that, a handwritten note from Marissa to Dad. Dad, just put it in my name. Violet is too young to handle a mortgage, and with her student loans, she will tank the rate. I will take care of her. If she ever needs the equity, we will split it. I promise. Just sign it over so we can close. She had taken the entire inheritance. She had used it to buy the house she now lived in, the house she had kicked me out of, and she had lied about the amount to keep me from asking questions. But there was more. Under the deed paperwork was a ledger, my father's handwriting again, Violet's contributions, the silent loan. June, 5 years ago. Violet paid the electric bill, $240. July, 5 years ago. Violet paid for the new water heater, $1,200. August, 5 years ago. Violet covered Marissa's car payment so she wouldn't default, $450. Page after page, dates, amounts. I remembered these. This was during the bad year when Dale had lost his job and Marissa was too stressed to work. I had been living in my own apartment then, working 2 jobs. Marissa would call me crying, saying they were going to lose the house, saying the kids would be on the street. So I paid the bills directly. I never gave her cash. I just logged into her accounts and paid them. I thought I was being a good sister. I thought I was helping the family survive a crisis. My father had tracked every single dollar. Total contribution by Violet, $14,300. I stared at the number. $14,000, plus half of the $80,000 down payment that was ethically mine. I wasn't a freeloader. I was an investor. I was the reason they had equity at all. I packed the papers back into the box, but I took the copies. I put them in my bag. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest. It wasn't the hot, reactive anger I had felt when I saw the Facebook post. This was different. This was the anger of a person who realizes their entire reality was a stage set constructed to exploit them. I drove to Elias Thorne's office. I didn't have an appointment, but his receptionist saw my face and buzzed him immediately. I walked into his office and dropped the new stack of papers on his mahogany desk. My father left a paper trail, I said. Elias picked up the ledger. He picked up the copy of the check. He read the note from Marissa. He let out a low whistle. This changes the landscape, he said. How? I asked. I am still not on the deed. No, he said. You are not on the deed. But this proves unjust enrichment. It proves that the down payment came from a source intended for the family benefit, which she misappropriated. And this ledger? This proves you have a financial interest in the property. You contributed to the preservation of the asset. He stood up and walked to the window. Combine this with the forged signature on the tax documents, he said. We are not just looking at identity theft anymore. Violet, we are looking at a pattern of constructive fraud. She used your inheritance to buy the house, used your income to maintain it, and then used your identity to secure it against tax debt. And then she evicted you and defamed you to cover her tracks. He turned back to me. I can file a lis pendens, he said. What is that? It is a notice of pending legal action tied to the property. He explained, it effectively freezes the title. She won't be able to refinance. She won't be able to sell. She won't be able to borrow a dime against that house until this is resolved. It alerts every lender in the state that the ownership of that house is in dispute. Do it, I said. It is an aggressive move, he warned. It is a declaration of war. She declared war when she posted that picture. I said, I am just bringing the ammunition. I went back to my apartment. I felt exhausted, but it was a clean exhaustion. I made a sandwich and sat at my small table. My phone rang. It was Marissa. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I moved out. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it rang again immediately. I picked it up. Hello, I said. Violet? Her voice was high, tight, a tremble in it that sounded like a violin string about to snap. Violet, I just got a notification from the bank about the refinance application. They said there is a flag on the property. I didn't say anything. I took a bite of my sandwich. Violet, are you there? Why aren't you saying anything? I am here. I said, did you do something? She asked. Her voice shifted from worry to accusation in a nanosecond. Did you call someone? We need this refinance. Violet, Dale needs the line of credit for the business. If we don't get it approved by Friday, we are in trouble. I swallowed. That sounds stressful. I said, stressful? She let out a hysterical laugh. It is not stressful. It is impossible. Why are you doing this? I know you are mad about the post. I know, okay? I shouldn't have posted it. I was venting. I was hurt that you left so abruptly. I left abruptly? I asked. I gave you 3 weeks' notice. You abandoned us. She screamed. After everything I did for you, I gave you a home. I gave you a family. And now you are, what, sabotaging us? I am scared. Violet, I am scared we are going to lose everything because of your pettiness. I listened to the words, abandon, sabotage, pettiness. She didn't know about the letter. She didn't know I had seen the ledger. She thought this was just about a Facebook post. I am not doing anything. Marissa, I said calmly, the records are just correcting themselves. What does that mean? She demanded. It means the truth has a way of surfacing. I said, Violet, stop talking in riddles. You need to fix this. You need to call whoever you called and tell them it is a mistake. If you don't, I swear to God, I will make sure everyone knows exactly how unstable you are. I have been protecting you. Violet, I have kept your secrets. But if you come after my house, I will ruin you. I felt a chill. But it wasn't fear, it was clarity. You can't ruin what you don't own. Marissa, I said. I hung up. I blocked her number for the night. I needed peace. But Marissa was not done. 2 days later, I received a text from my Aunt Linda. Sunday dinner at Marissa's. She says she wants to bury the hatchet. Please come. Family needs to stick together. I knew what it was. It wasn't a peace offering. It was a court summons. She was gathering the jury. Attorney Thorne had advised me to avoid confrontation, but he had also said, witnesses are useful. If Marissa was going to spin a narrative, I wanted to hear it. I wanted to see the performance. I arrived at the house at 5 o'clock on Sunday. The driveway was full. Dale's new truck was parked prominently in the center, shining under the streetlights, a $40,000 monument to their bad decisions. I walked up the path. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside. The smell of roast chicken and expensive candles hit me. It smelled like home. It smelled like the lie I had lived in for 2 years. There were about 12 people in the living room, Aunt Linda, Uncle Jerry, 2 cousins, and a few of Marissa's inner circle friends. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. It didn't taper off. It died. Violet! Marissa cried out. She rushed over to me. She was wearing a soft, cream-colored sweater that looked cashmere. Her hair was perfectly messy. She looked fragile. She looked like the victim. She hugged me. It was a tight, desperate hug. I stood stiffly, my arms at my sides. I am so glad you came. She whispered loud enough for the room to hear. I was so worried you wouldn't. She pulled back and looked at me with watery eyes. You look tired. Vi, are you eating? You look thin. I am fine. Marissa, I said. She turned to the room, keeping her hand on my arm like a shackle. Everyone, look who is here. I told you she would come. Violet is she is going through a hard time right now, but she is still family. She guided me into the room. I saw the looks on their faces. Pity, confusion, suspicion. They had seen the post. They had read the comments. And now, seeing Marissa's benevolent, worried act, they were buying it. Poor Marissa, trying so hard with her unstable sister. I took a glass of water and stood near the fireplace. I didn't speak. I just watched. I watched Marissa work the room. She moved from person to person, touching their arms, lowering her voice. I heard snippets of conversation. I'm really worried about her mental state. I found some strange papers in her room, and I think she's hallucinating. She keeps talking about money that doesn't make sense. She was planting the seeds of insanity. If I sued her, if I showed the ledger, she would say, "See? I told you she was obsessed. I told you she was making things up. It was masterfully done." Dale was in the corner, holding a beer. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked sweaty. He knew about the tax notice. He knew I knew. I walked over to him. "Hi." "Dale," I said. He jumped slightly. "Hey, Vi, good to see you. How is the consulting business?" I asked. He took a long swig of beer. "Good. Yeah, good. Just getting things off the ground. You know how it is." "I do." I said. "I hear the truck is running well." He coughed. "Yeah. Look, Vi, I think Marissa wants us to sit for dinner." We sat at the long dining table. Marissa sat at the head. I was placed in the middle, between Aunt Linda and my cousin Sarah. "So, Violet, Aunt Linda said, buttering a roll. Marissa tells us you are living in the East End now. Is it safe over there? It is quiet. I said. Marissa sighed. I offered to let her stay here longer. Linda, I told her she didn't have to rush, but she bolted. I think she just needed to run away from everything. The breakup really broke her. She looked at me with sad eyes. I just want you to know, Vi, that this is still your home. No matter what you say about us, no matter how angry you are, the door is always open. She was doing it again, framing my departure as a mental break, framing her eviction of me as my choice to run. I put my fork down. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. I didn't run. Marissa, I said. My voice was low, steady. I moved out because I got a job, and because you asked me to leave. Marissa laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. Oh, honey, I never asked you to leave. I said it was time to spread your wings. There is a difference. And the Facebook post? I asked. The one calling me a freeloader? Was that encouraging me to spread my wings? The table went deadly silent. Aunt Linda stopped chewing. Marissa's face hardened. Her eyes narrowed, just for a second, before filling with fresh tears. It was a joke. Violet, she cried. It was just a silly joke about empty nesting. My God, you take everything so seriously. This is what I mean. Everyone. She twists everything. She takes a moment of celebration and turns it into an attack. She looked around the table, pleading for validation. I am just trying to have a nice family dinner. She sobbed. I'm just trying to bring us together. And she comes here and starts picking fights. Aunt Linda reached out and patted Marissa's hand. It is okay, sweetie. She is just stressed. Linda looked at me disapprovingly. Violet, really? Your sister cooked this meal. Let's not bring up internet drama. I looked at them. I looked at the circle of family that Marissa had successfully manipulated. They didn't know about the $80,000. They didn't know about the forged signature. They didn't know about the tax lien. They only knew what she showed them. I realized then that I couldn't win this room. Not tonight. Not with words. I stood up. Thank you for the chicken. Marissa, I said. Where are you going? She demanded. We haven't even had dessert. I have to go, I said. I have a lot of paperwork to go through. I walked out. Behind me, I heard Marissa burst into loud, theatrical sobbing. See? See how she treats me? I walked to my car. The night air was cold and sharp. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I drove back to my apartment. As I walked in the door, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin Sarah. Hey Vi, sorry about dinner. I didn't know she posted that stuff online. I looked it up after you left. It felt mean. She shouldn't have done that. I stared at the message. One crack. Marissa had overplayed her hand. The joke defense didn't land when the evidence was right there on the screen. Sarah had seen the malice. I replied, Thanks, Sarah. There is a lot more than that, but I am handling it. I sat down at my desk. I opened the binder. I had the proof of the past, the ledger. I had the proof of the present, the tax forgery. I had the proof of the damages, the job loss. And now, I had the ticking clock. I opened the mail that had arrived that day. Another certified letter. Notice of lien filing. To Marissa Shelby, Dale Shelby, and Violet Morgan. Authorized party. The Tax Claim Bureau has initiated a lien against the property at 424 Maplewood Drive due to non-payment of the installment agreement. It was happening. The lien was being filed. My name was about to be officially, publicly attached to a tax default. If this hit the public record, my background check at Arrowhead Supply would go from paused to failed. I would lose the job permanently. I would be branded financially irresponsible. I had days, maybe hours, to stop it. I couldn't wait for a long civil suit. I couldn't wait for Elias Thorne to file motions and wait for a judge to schedule a hearing. I needed to blow the whole thing up. Marissa wanted a public story. She wanted to perform for the neighbors and the family. Fine, she had an upcoming event. I remembered seeing the flyer on her fridge during the dinner. She was hosting a fundraiser for the Neighborhood Watch. a community pillar event. She was the hostess. She was going to be standing in front of the most important people in Glen Haven, pretending to be the queen of the cul-de-sac. I looked at the binder. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to protect her secrets. I picked up my pen and wrote a new entry in my timeline. Next Friday. The fundraiser. Action. The truth. I closed the binder. The snap of the ring sounded like a gunshot in the empty room. I was done being the victim. It was time to be the prosecutor. The conference room at Harker & Wren was a sterile glass box that seemed designed to extract emotion from the air and replace it with cold. Hard strategy. I sat at the long table, my hands clasped on top of my growing binder of evidence. Elias Thorne stood at the whiteboard, a blue marker in his hand, mapping out the destruction of my sister's meticulously crafted lie. "This is a surgical operation. Violet," he said, drawing a straight line connecting two boxes. "We do not flail. We do not rant. We execute." He capped the marker and turned to me. "Step 1, he said. "We file the formal dispute and the identity fraud report with the Federal Trade Commission. That generates an official affidavit. It turns your claim from a family squabble into a federal reference number. Step 2, he continued. "We serve the Tax Claim Bureau and Valley Ridge Financial with that affidavit. We demand an immediate freeze on the accounts and a preservation of all records. That stops the clock on the lien." "And step 3? I asked. "Step 3 is the civil claim," he said. "But before we get there, we need to make sure the foundation is concrete." He slid a folder across the table toward me. I sent the copy of the notarized tax affidavit to a forensic document examiner, he said, a handwriting expert. I opened the folder. Inside was a blown-up image of the forged signature, the shaky Violet Morgan, overlaid with a grid. Next to it was a copy of my real signature from an old lease agreement I had found in my files. "What did they find?" I asked. "It is a simulation," Thorne said, "but not a freehand one. The examiner believes it was traced. Specifically, it mimics the pressure points of a signature done with a felt-tip pen." I frowned. "I never use felt-tip pens. I only use ballpoints." Thorne nodded. "Exactly. But Marissa does. She likes those expensive architectural pens. The theory is that she took a document you had already signed, maybe a birthday card, maybe that lease, put it on a light box or a window, and traced it onto the affidavit. That explains the shakiness. She was moving slowly to stay on the line. I felt a chill go through me. I could picture it. Marissa standing at the window in the dining room, the afternoon sun streaming through, tracing my name onto a government document while her kids played in the next room. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was an arts and crafts project. "This implies access," Thorne said. "She had access to your original signatures. She had access to the tools. It strengthens the argument that this was premeditated domestic fraud." We filed the paperwork that afternoon. I signed the affidavit of identity theft with a pen that felt heavy in my hand. It was the point of no return. Once I filed this, I was officially accusing my sister of a felony. I walked out of the office into the bright sunlight of downtown Glen Haven, feeling exposed but steady. I was not the freeloader anymore. I was the plaintiff. The reaction was immediate. 2 days later, I was in the break room at my temp agency. I had picked up a few shifts filing papers just to keep some cash coming in, when my phone started buzzing. It was Marissa. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again, and again, and again, 7 times in 3 minutes. Then a text message popped up. "How dare you? The sheriff just left my porch. How dare you do this to us?" I went out to my car for my lunch break and sat in the driver's seat. I listened to the voicemail she had left. "Violet." Her voice was a shriek, distorted by the microphone. "Are you insane? You sent a sheriff to serve me with fraud papers? In front of the neighbors? Do you have any idea what you have done? You are ruining my life over a misunderstanding. Call me back right now, or so help me God I will." The message cut off. I didn't call her back. I sat there, eating my apple, listening to the silence that followed the scream. It was the first time in my life that her anger didn't make me crumble. It made me feel validated. People don't scream like that when they are innocent. They scream like that when they are caught. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with a Facebook notification. I shouldn't have looked, but I had to know the narrative she was spinning. She had posted a status update. No photo this time, just a stark black background with white text. It is sad when people you love let jealousy turn them into monsters. Some people can't stand to see others build a happy life, so they try to tear it down with lies and lawsuits. Being attacked by your own blood is a special kind of betrayal. But the truth always wins. Praying for peace. Jealousy is a disease protecting my family. I read the comments. Oh my God. Rissa, what happened? Stay strong. Mama, haters gonna hate. Is this about the sister again? I knew she was trouble. She was doubling down. She wasn't scared. She was furious. She was framing my legal defense as an attack born of jealousy. She was telling the world that I was suing her because I was envious of her life, the life she had built on my credit and my father's stolen money. It made my blood boil, but I remembered Thorne's advice. Do not engage. Let her dig. Every post she made was evidence of malice. Every lie she told was another brick in the wall I was building around her. I put the phone away and went back to work. That afternoon, I received a different kind of call. Violet? This is David Henderson from Arrowhead Supply. My heart jumped. Mr. Henderson, the hiring manager. Hi, Mr. Henderson, I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Look, Violet, he said. He sounded tired. I know HR put a pause on your hiring, and I know the official line is that we are reviewing social concerns, but I liked you. You were the best candidate we interviewed. Thank you, I said. He paused. I saw some things circulating online, and then I heard from a friend of a friend that there is some legal stuff happening. I need to ask you directly. Is there something we should know? Is there a character issue here? Because if you are the person your sister is painting you to be, I can't bring you into a sensitive inventory role. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where I could either hide or tell the truth. Mr. Henderson, I said clearly, I am currently the victim of identity fraud involving a family member. The social media posts you saw are a retaliation campaign because I began the legal process to clear my name from debt I did not incur. I waited. Identity fraud? He asked. Yes, I said. I have filed a police report and a federal affidavit. I have a lawyer. I am not fighting a social media war. Sir, I am fighting a legal one to protect my credit and my reputation. The character issue is that I refuse to accept liability for a forged signature. There was a long silence on the line. Okay, he said finally. That makes a difference. I can send you the case number. I said, and the affidavit? Do that, he said. Send it to me directly. Bypass HR for a minute. Let me see what I can do. I sent the documents within 5 minutes. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I hadn't spun a story. I hadn't bad-mouthed Marissa. I had just presented the facts. And the facts were strong enough to stand on their own. But the pressure from the family wasn't over. That evening, there was a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It was Dale. My brother-in-law stood in the hallway, wearing his business-casual polo shirt and holding a manila envelope. He looked sweaty and uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I opened the door, but I kept the chain on. What do you want? Dale? I asked. Vi, come on, he said, forcing a smile. Open up. I just want to talk. Just family to family. I am not opening the door. Dale. I said, say what you need to say. He sighed and wiped his forehead. Look, Marissa she is a mess. You know how she gets, this whole lawsuit thing, the sheriff? It is too much. We want to make it right. Make it right? I repeated. Yeah, he said. He held up the envelope. I talked to some people. I moved some money around. I have a cashier's check here. $5,000. $5,000. It is for you, he said eagerly. To help you get set up. New furniture. Whatever you need. And we will take care of the taxes. I promise. I will get on a payment plan. We will get your name off everything. I looked at the envelope through the crack in the door. $5,000. It was a lot of money. It would cover my rent for 4 months. It would buy a sofa. It would give me breathing room while I waited for the Arrowhead job. What is the catch? I asked. No catch, Dale said quickly. Too quickly. Just inside the envelope. There is a little document. Just a standard release. You know, saying that we are square. That you won't pursue any more legal stuff. So we can just put this behind us. A release. They wanted me to sign away my right to sue. They wanted me to sign a paper that said, essentially, that the fraud never happened, that it was just a misunderstanding that we settled for cash. If I signed that, the freeloader narrative would stand forever. Marissa would keep the post up. She would tell everyone that she gave me money to help me out, because I was desperate. I would be the charity case who sued her for a handout. But the money... I looked at my empty apartment. I looked at the air mattress in the corner. $5,000 would stop the anxiety that woke me up at 3 a.m. I thought about it. I really thought about it. Then I heard Elias Thorne's voice in my head. If you sign a release, you validate their story. You become an accomplice to your own erasure. And I remembered the ledger in the safe deposit box. I had already contributed $14,000. And half of the $80,000 down payment was morally mine. $5,000 wasn't a settlement. It was an insult. Keep the money. Dale, I said. Vi, don't be stupid, he hissed. His nice guy mask slipped. You need this. You have nothing. I have the truth, I said. And that is worth more than $5,000. I realized then that they were scared. You don't offer cash settlements if you think you can win in court. You offer cash when you know you're going to lose. I don't want your hush money. I said, I want my name back. Tell Marissa I will see her in court. I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from the adrenaline of turning down the easy way out. I called Thorne immediately. They tried to buy me off. I said, good, Thorne said. That shows consciousness of guilt. Did you take it? No. I said, excellent. Now we press harder. The next day, I went back to the municipal building. I wanted to see if there were any other cracks in the facade. The clerk, Mrs. Higgins, recognized me this time. She actually smiled. I was digging through the old files. She said quietly, after you left last time. And? I asked. I found something interesting in the rejected pile from 4 years ago. She said. She slid a piece of paper across the counter. It was another affidavit of residency, but this one wasn't for me. It was for Linda Miller, my Aunt Linda. The address was 424 Maplewood Drive, but across the front, stamped in red ink, was rejected. ID mismatch. She tried to do it to Linda. Mrs. Higgins whispered, before you moved in, she tried to list your aunt as the responsible party for the utilities and the tax notices. But the notary caught it. The ID didn't match the signature. My jaw dropped. Marissa had tried to frame Aunt Linda first. When that failed, she had waited for me. I was the backup victim. This wasn't just a desperate move during a bad year. This was her standard operating procedure. She viewed family members as credit lines to be opened and discarded. Can I get a certified copy of this? I asked. Mrs. Higgins nodded. I thought you might ask that. I took the rejected form to my car. I thought about Aunt Linda at the dinner, patting Marissa's hand, telling me to be nice. She tried to do this to you too. Linda, you just got lucky. I needed more. I needed witnesses. I went back to the strip mall where the notary, Lakeside Mail and Print, was located. I found the owner again. I need to find Brenda. I said, the employee who notarized the forgery. I can't give out personal info. The owner said, looking nervous, I am not going to hurt her. I said, I just need to ask her a question. If this goes to court, you are going to be subpoenaed anyway. It is better if we talk to her first. He hesitated, then scribbled a number on a sticky note. She works at the diner on 4th Street now. I went to the diner. I ordered a coffee. I waited until the lunch rush died down. Brenda was a woman in her 50s with frizzy hair and a tired face. I approached her. "Brenda?" I asked. She looked wary. "Yeah? My name is Violet Morgan. You notarized a document for me last February, except I wasn't there." Her face went pale. She looked around the diner. "Look," she whispered, "I didn't mean no harm. The lady, your sister, she came in all the time. She was nice. She brought me cookies once. She said you were in the car with a migraine and couldn't handle the fluorescent lights. She had your license. It looked like you. I wanted to be helpful. She charmed you." I said, "She made me feel like I was doing a good deed." Brenda said, "Helping a sick sister. I didn't know it was for taxes. Will you sign a statement saying that?" I asked. "That I wasn't in the room? That she brought the document in already signed?" Brenda looked terrified. "Will I get in trouble?" "You are already in trouble." "Brenda," I said gently, "but if you tell the truth, it shows you were manipulated, not malicious. It helps." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I will sign it." I had one more stop. I drove back to my old neighborhood. I parked down the street from Marissa's house so she wouldn't see my car. I walked 2 houses down to Mrs. Vance's house. Mrs. Vance was the neighborhood gossip. She sat on her porch all day, watching the street. She saw everything. "Mrs. Vance?" I called out. "Violet," she chirped. "I haven't seen you in weeks. I saw your sister's post. Is everything okay?" "Mrs. Vance, I need to ask you something weird." I said, "Do you remember when I first moved in? About 2 years ago?" "Oh, yes," she said. "I remember the U-Haul. Do you remember seeing Marissa sitting on the porch with a clipboard? Maybe practicing writing something?" Mrs. Vance's eyes lit up. She loved being a witness. "Funny you should say that." She said, "I do remember. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the garbage truck was coming." She was sitting on the swing with a stack of papers. She was writing the same thing over and over again. I walked by and asked what she was doing. "What did she say?" I asked. She laughed and said, "Oh, just helping Violet with some forms. Her handwriting is so messy. I have to fix it for her." I thought it was sweet. Sweet, practicing my signature in broad daylight, framing it as an act of kindness. "Would you be willing to write that down?" I asked. "For you?" "Anything." "Honey," Mrs. Vance leaned in. "Between you and me?" I never liked that husband of hers. Too shiny. By the end of the week, my binder was bursting. I had the forensic report. I had the rejected affidavit for Aunt Linda. I had Brenda's confession. I had Mrs. Vance's statement. I had the refusal of the $5,000 bribe. I had the email from Arrowhead Supply proving damages. I had the ledger from my father. I met with Elias Thorne again. "We have enough to bury her," he said. "We can file the lawsuit tomorrow." "But there is a problem," I said. "The lawsuit will take months. The rumor mill is moving now." Thorne nodded. "She is winning the court of public opinion while we are building the case for the court of law." "Exactly." I said, "And she is hosting that fundraiser next Friday, the community pillar event. She invited the mayor. She invited the bank president." Thorne leaned back in his chair. "Usually, I advise clients to stay quiet," he said. "But in cases of defamation, sometimes the only way to stop the bleeding is a tourniquet of truth, applied publicly." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I am suggesting that you don't wait for the deposition," he said. "If she is going to use a community event to cement her reputation as a saint, perhaps the community deserves to see the sinner." He looked at me carefully. "But it has to be controlled. Violet, no screaming, no hair pulling, just paper. You bring the truth into the room, and you let it sit there." I understood. I went home and prepared the final packet. I made 20 copies. I included the timeline. I included the side-by-side comparison of the real signature and the forgery. I included the rejected affidavit for Aunt Linda. I included the letter from my father. And I included the official filing receipt for the fraud lawsuit. I put them in neat, clear folders. I looked at the invitation Marissa had posted online. Glenhaven Community Fundraiser. Hosted by Marissa and Dale Shelby. Friday, 7 p.m., 424 Maplewood Drive. She was hosting it at the house, the house that my father's money bought, the house that my credit score was keeping afloat, the house where she had forged my name. She was going to stand in that living room, holding a glass of wine, and tell everyone how wonderful she was. She was going to solidify her social standing so that when the lawsuit finally hit, she would have an army of defenders saying, "Oh, poor Marissa. She does so much for the community. Her sister is just crazy." Unless I stopped it, unless I walked into that room and popped the bubble. I felt a wave of nausea. I was not a confrontational person. The idea of walking into a party and dropping a bomb made my knees weak. But then I looked at the Facebook post again. Jealousy is a disease. She wasn't going to stop. She was going to keep taking and taking until there was nothing left of me. She would take my reputation just like she took my money. I closed the binder. I wasn't going to the party to make a scene. I was going to the party to return some property. I was going to give her back her lies. I picked up my phone and texted Tessa. "Are you free Friday night?" Tessa replied instantly, "Yes. Why?" "I need a ride to the fundraiser." I wrote, "And I need you to hold my purse while I end this." Tessa sent back a single emoji. The fire symbol. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Friday was 2 days away. Marissa thought she was the pillar of the neighborhood. She was about to find out what happens when you build a pillar on a sinkhole. I turned off the lights in my apartment. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one bringing the light, and it was going to be blinding. Tessa's car idled at the curb, the engine humming a low, steady note that vibrated against the soles of my shoes. Through the passenger window, 424 Maplewood Drive looked like a lantern glowing in the dark. Every window was lit. The front porch was draped in tasteful string lights. There were cars lining the street for 2 blocks. It was the picture of suburban success. It was the stage my sister had built. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Tessa asked. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "We can just turn around. We can let the lawyers handle it on Monday." I looked at the house. I looked at the binder in my lap. It was heavy, a physical weight that anchored me to the seat. "If I wait until Monday," I said, "she cements the story tonight. She is in there right now, telling the mayor and the bank president and the neighbors that I am a mental case who abandoned her. If I let her finish that performance, no lawsuit in the world will scrub the stain off my name." Tessa nodded. She turned off the car. "Okay," she said. "Let's go crash a party." I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. I had dressed intentionally. No power suit, no revenge dress. I wore a simple gray sweater and black trousers. I wore flat shoes. I wore almost no makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what I was. A tired, serious woman who had come to collect her property. I didn't look like someone there for drama. I looked like someone there for business. We walked up the driveway. The night air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and wood smoke. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. It wasn't anger anymore. The hot, red rage of the last week had cooled into something gray and heavy. It was grief. I was about to walk into my sister's house and dismantle her life. I was about to prove that the person who had shared a bunk bed with me, the person who had held my hand at our father's funeral, was a criminal. I wasn't winning. I was just stopping the losing. The front door was open. Soft jazz music drifted out, mixed with the murmur of 50 people talking at once. We stepped inside. The foyer was crowded. A waiter walked by with a tray of appetizers. I recognized the caterer. Marissa had hired the most expensive one in town. She was spending money she didn't have to impress people she didn't like. "Violet?" The voice came from my left. It was Mrs. Vance, the neighbor who had seen Marissa practicing my signature. She looked surprised, her eyes darting from me to the crowded living room. "Hi, Mrs. Vance?" I said quietly. I thought you weren't talking to the family," she whispered. "I'm just here to clear up some paperwork." I said. I moved deeper into the house. Tessa stayed close to my shoulder. A silent guard. We reached the archway of the living room. Marissa was in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne. She was wearing a shimmering navy dress that I knew cost more than my monthly rent. She was laughing at something the mayor was saying. Her head thrown back, her neck exposed. She looked radiant. She looked successful. Then she turned her head. Her eyes locked onto mine. The smile didn't drop. It didn't even flicker. It just froze. The warmth drained out of it, leaving a rictus of terror that only I could see. "Excuse me," she said to the mayor. "My sister just arrived." She walked toward me. She moved fast, cutting through the crowd like a shark. She reached me and threw her arms around me in a crushing hug. The smell of her perfume, expensive floral, with an undertone of gin, filled my nose. She squeezed me hard enough to bruise. "What are you doing here?" she hissed into my ear. Her voice was a razor blade wrapped in velvet. "Get out." "Hello?" "Marissa," I said. I didn't hug her back. "Don't do this here," she whispered, her lips brushing my cheek so it looked like a kiss. "I swear to God. Violet, if you make a scene, I will have the police drag you out. Do not ruin this for me." I pulled back gently. "I am not here to make a scene." I said, "I am just listening." Marissa stared at me, her chest heaving slightly. She looked at the binder in my hand. She looked at Tessa. She calculated the odds of dragging me out without attracting attention, and she realized they were 0. "Fine," she said, stepping back and putting the mask back on. Her voice went loud and bright. "Violet, I am so happy you decided to come. Everyone, look! Violet made it." A few heads turned. There was a ripple of awkward applause. People looked at me with curiosity. I saw the whispers starting behind hands. "That's the sister, the unstable one, the freeloader." Marissa grabbed my hand and pulled me slightly into the room. "Grab a drink, sweetie," she said. "Try the crab cakes." We were just about to start the speeches. She turned and walked back to the fireplace, tapping a spoon against her glass. "Attention! Attention, everyone!" The room went quiet. Marissa stood on the hearth of the fireplace, elevated above the crowd. She looked like a queen addressing her court. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began. Her voice was warm, trembling with practiced emotion. "This community means the world to Dale and me. When we bought this house—" She paused, looking down at the floor as if overcome with gratitude. "When we bought this house, we wanted it to be a sanctuary. Not just for us, but for everyone. We have always believed that those who have been blessed have a duty to give." Murmurs of agreement from the room. "But," she continued, looking up with a wry smile, "lately I have had to learn a hard lesson. I have had to learn that you can't pour from an empty cup. I have had to learn that sometimes people take your kindness for weakness." She glanced directly at me. "We have had some family struggles recently," she said. "Some boundary issues. It is hard when you try to lift someone up, and they just want to pull you down to their level. But I am learning that I have to protect my peace. I have to protect this home." She placed a hand on her chest. "So tonight is about resilience. It is about standing tall against the negativity. It is about saying no to the freeloaders, emotional and financial, so we can say yes to our true community." The room erupted in applause. People cheered. Someone shouted, "We love you, Marissa." I stood there, feeling the applause wash over me like acid. She was using me as a prop, in real time. She was taking the crimes she had committed against me, the theft, the exploitation, and twisting them into a story of her own heroism. She was the martyr. I was the burden she had finally shed. If I walked out now, that story became the truth. I looked at Tessa. She gave me a small nod. "Go." I didn't walk toward Marissa. I turned to my left. Standing near the buffet table was Mrs. Albright, the event organizer, a woman with stiff hair and a pearl necklace who took neighborhood reputation very seriously. Next to her was Mr. Sterling, a member of the Glen Haven Neighborhood Council, a man known for his obsession with zoning laws and property values. I walked over to them. "Mrs. Albright? Mr. Sterling?" I asked. Mrs. Albright looked at me down her nose. "Violet, we were just listening to your sister's lovely speech. It was a lovely speech." I agreed. My voice was calm, low. But I am afraid there is a complication you need to be aware of. Mrs. Albright frowned. A complication? I need to speak with you both privately. I said, immediately. It concerns the title of this property and a significant legal liability regarding the funds being raised tonight. Mr. Sterling's ears perked up at the words legal liability. What are you talking about? He asked. I cannot discuss it here, I said, but I have documentation regarding active identity fraud connected to this address. If this organization is using this home as a base of operations, you need to see this before the night continues. To protect the council's liability, I use the magic words, liability, fraud. Mrs. Albright looked at Marissa, who was now hugging the mayor. Then she looked at the thick binder in my hand. Is this about the rumors? Mrs. Albright asked. It is about the facts. I said, okay. Mister? Sterling said. He put down his wine glass. Let's go into the den. We walked out of the living room. I felt Marissa's eyes on my back. I knew she saw us leaving. I knew the panic was starting to claw at her throat. We went into the den, a small wood-paneled room off the hallway. It was Dale's man cave, filled with golf trophies and framed photos of the new truck. I closed the door. The sound of the party became a muffled hum. I placed the binder on the desk. I opened it. I didn't start with a story. I started with the paper. This is a notarized affidavit from the Tax Claim Bureau. I said, pointing to the document, it obligates the signer to pay delinquent taxes on this property. It is dated February 12th of last year. I pointed to the signature. This purports to be my signature. I said, Mr. Sterling leaned in. Okay. I turned the page. This is the notary log from Lakeside Mail and Print for that same date. I said, note the ID number recorded. It does not match my driver's license. I placed my license on the desk next to the copy of the log. And this, I said, turning the page again, is a sworn statement from the notary employee, admitting that I was not present when this document was stamped. She states that my sister, Marissa Shelby, brought the document in already signed. Mrs. Albright gasped. I continued. I turned to the forensic report. This is a handwriting analysis confirming the signature is a tracing, likely done with a felt-tip pen. I turned to the notice of lien, and this is the notice of lien filing received this week, naming me as the responsible party for the default on this property. I looked up at them. My sister is currently hosting a fundraiser in a house that is subject to a tax lien, using funds she obtained by forging my name on government documents. She has publicly stated that I am a freeloader to cover the fact that she has been using my credit identity to secure her own debts. The room was silent. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly. Mister? Sterling picked up the lien notice. He adjusted his glasses. This is serious, he muttered. If the property is in default, and there is fraud involved, the council cannot be associated with this. Mrs. Albright looked pale. But Marissa is the chair of the committee. She is under investigation for a felony. I said, I filed the police report and the federal identity theft affidavit 3 days ago. Here is the case number. I slid the final piece of paper across the desk. The door to the den burst open. Marissa stood there. She was breathing hard. Her face was flushed. What are you doing? She demanded. Her voice was high, bordering on a scream. Get out of my house! Mrs. Albright stepped back, looking at Marissa with new eyes. Marissa, Mr. Sterling said, his voice grave. We are looking at some very concerning documents. Marissa froze. She looked at the binder open on the desk. She saw the notary log. She saw the lie laid out in black and white. She lunged for the binder. You can't look at that. She screamed. That is private. She stole that. I put my hand on the binder, holding it down. I didn't steal it. Marissa, I said, it is public record. Marissa turned on me. Her face twisted into something ugly, something desperate. You are a liar, she shrieked. You are just jealous because I have a life and you have nothing. You are trying to ruin me. She looked at Mrs. Albright. Don't listen to her. She's unstable. She has been off her meds since the breakup. She offered to sign those papers. She begged me to let her help. I stood very still. I didn't raise my voice. I offered to sign? I asked. Yes, Marissa yelled. You said you wanted to contribute. You said you wanted to pay your share. So you admit I signed them? I asked. Of course you signed them, you ungrateful little brat. You signed them right at the kitchen table. The room went dead silent. I looked at Mr. Sterling. I looked at Mrs. Albright. Marissa just said I signed them at the kitchen table, I said calmly. I turned to the notary log page again, but this document was notarized at Lakeside Mail and Print. A notary requires the person to be present in the office. If I signed it at the kitchen table, as Marissa just claimed, then the notarization is invalid. And if the notarization is invalid, the document is fraud. Marissa's mouth opened, then closed. She realized the trap she had just walked into. She had just confessed to the crime. She had confessed that I wasn't at the notary. I didn't mean, she stammered. And I continued, relentless now. If I signed it, why does the notary log show a fake ID number? Did I use a fake ID to sign my own name? Marissa? Marissa backed up until she hit the door frame. She looked around the room, searching for an escape, searching for a lie that would work. You are trying to steal my house, she whispered. That is what this is. You want the house. I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had loved. I looked at the woman who had sold me out for a truck and a kitchen renovation. I don't want your house, Marissa, I said. I picked up the binder. I snapped it shut. I just want my name back. Marissa crumbled. She didn't faint, but she slumped, sliding down the doorframe until she was sitting on the floor, her expensive dress pooling around her. She put her face in her hands and began to sob, not the pretty performative crying she had done earlier. Ugly, deep, terrified sobbing. Dale appeared in the doorway behind her. He looked at Marissa on the floor. He looked at Mr. Sterling holding the fraud affidavit. Oh boy, Dale whispered. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. Mrs. Shelby, he said, I think it would be best if we suspended the event, and I will need to contact the municipal office on Monday regarding the council's funds. Marissa didn't answer. She just wept. I walked past her. I didn't look down. I stepped over the hem of her dress. I walked out of the den, back into the hallway. The party was still going on. People were still eating crab cakes. The music was still playing. They didn't know yet that the hostess was on the floor in the other room, that the pillar of the community had just collapsed, but they would know soon. Mr. Sterling and Mrs. Albright were walking out behind me, looking grim. The whispers would start in 5 minutes. The text messages would fly. By morning, everyone in Glenhaven would know. I found Tessa by the front door. She took one look at my face and opened the door. Done? She asked. Done, I said. We walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that didn't smell of lies and expensive perfume. We walked to the car. I got in and buckled my seatbelt. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me feeling hollowed out. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email. From David Henderson, Arrowhead Supply. I hesitated before opening it. Subject: Employment status, update. Dear Violet, I reviewed the documentation you sent. I also spoke with our legal counsel. The affidavit and the police report number are sufficient to contextualize the background check flags. We are satisfied that the financial discrepancies are not a reflection of your character, but rather a legal matter in which you are the aggrieved party. We are lifting the pause. Your start date is next Monday. Welcome to the team. David. I let the phone drop into my lap. I stared out the window as Tessa started the car. I had the job. I had the truth. I had my name. Marissa would lose the house. The lien would trigger the mortgage default. The fraud investigation would likely result in charges, or at least a massive settlement that would bankrupt them. The reputation she valued so much was gone. It was a total victory. But as we drove away, watching the lights of 424 Maplewood Drive fade in the rearview mirror, I didn't smile. I thought about the letter from my father. I hope you left on your own terms. I had, but I also knew that when the masks come off, you don't just see the monster underneath, you see the stranger. And the hardest part wasn't fighting the monster, it was accepting that the stranger was the person you had called sister for 33 years. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cool glass. Tessa reached over and squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. And for the first time in 2 years, I knew it was true. Thank you so much for listening to Violet's story. It has been a journey walking through the fire with her. From the guest room in Glen Haven to the other side of the truth, writing family drama is always intense because it touches on the fears we all have. Betrayal by the people who are supposed to protect us. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with family? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the moment the tables turn. Share your thoughts in English. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your receipts.